Morning folks, Rob here, Tasman Energy, down under in Tasmania, Australia. And this video series is about installing a small solar system. This solar system would be suited to, in this case, a shed, which has got very big power tools. It would be suited to a small cabin in the bush. It would be suited to a motorhome, and it would be suited probably to a yacht. This first video in the series is detailing the installation of the battery bank. The batteries I've chosen for this installation are commonly available golf cart batteries called in the trade T105s. They're a 6-volt lead acid battery, and I've chosen these against the lithiums or the more modern batteries that you might see on the market because they're Stone Age reliable, the technology's been around a long time, and they're very reasonably priced. They also have a very long life for the price. I would be expecting about 10 years from this battery bank installation. There's 8 of them here. They're 225 amp hours a piece and they're 6 volts each. So 6 times 8 is 48. It's going to be a 48 volt system and it's going to be 225 amp hours. 225 amp hours will make a 10 kilowatt battery. A 10 kilowatt battery in lead acid, I can't use the entire 10 kilowatts. It would destroy the batteries very quick. But this will give me a usable capacity of about 6 kilowatts, which is enough for me to come in here and machine some wood. It's enough to run the lights when I'm out here of a night time. It's enough to run a fridge, a kettle, a toaster, all that stuff you might have in the smoko room in the corner. And they're quite easy to install. They're not big and heavy and they don't require a major infrastructure. When I put these batteries in, I'm going to have to connect them together in a series connection. To do that, I need a wire that connects each battery together. And I've made these myself. Here they are down here on the table. These are just a piece of 25mm battery cable, 25 square millimeter battery cable, and on the end I've crimped on lugs and covered the lugs with heat shrink. The lugs you put on these cables are readily available from electrical stores. That's these here, and you put them on with a special tool like this, but this tool is actually pretty expensive, and for you folk at home doing your own installations, they're not really necessary. You can make a very good connection with these connectors just by putting the cable in them and placing the connector in a steel vise and squeezing it till it's flat and it's lightly got the cable gripped inside. Then take it out and put it on an anvil or a block of steel or even a very strong piece of concrete and get a punch and punch in the center of it and indent the center, and that will grip the copper wire just as tightly as these crimp tools are capable of doing it. Detailed more in the installation manual, which you can download from my website. When I put these cables on the batteries, I'll need to do it, they go on with a nut on these terminals here. I'll need to do it with a spanner. Now this is the first bit of safety information about these batteries. When I connect them up, I've got to be very careful that I don't short these terminals together. And there's 2 ways I can do this. I can use a spanner. I've got a little shifting spanner here, and it's physically too short. I can drop it on the batteries. It cannot touch the 2 terminals together. Bear in mind, if you touch the 2 terminals on these batteries together, an enormous amount of current can flow. Enough current to send the shifter red hot, to burn your hand and to possibly destroy the battery. It's something that you just do not want to do. So you can physically use it, you can use a spanner that's physically too short to touch the 2 terminals. But I find a shifter a little bit primitive. The other thing to do is to use a spanner like this. It's a ratchet spanner. It'll make it very quick to do up the nuts holding the cables on. It is long enough to touch the 2 terminals, so I've insulated the handle, so if I inadvertently touch the 2 terminals of the battery together, nothing will happen. So your choice here in connecting up is a tool that's insulated or a tool that's too short to touch the battery terminals. Where I'm putting these batteries is a battery housing I've made on the wall here. And I can already hear you saying, what the hell have you put them on the wall for? But in this shed, space is at a premium, and I like to be able to sweep the floor. And I also want my batteries on display so people can see them. People come in and have a look at my solar system, so I put them on a shelf here on the wall. It's also probably about the warmest and least temperature varying place in the shed. So it's chosen to have a more stable temperature than the floor, which can get very cold. What I've found also with battery installations that have been put on the floor is they're often, look, you've got to house them in boxes to protect them, and often the boxes get covered in stuff and the batteries get forgotten about and not noticed, and then the maintenance starts to slip on them. On this shelf here, another thing we've got to talk about with flooded lead acid batteries is some acid containment in case the batteries split or open up and leak acid. And I've built acid containment into these shelves by making them out of very heavy duty timber, coating them with quite a few coats of a very thick plastic paint, and sealing all the joins with a roof and gutter silicone to make them quite watertight. And the requirement, I believe, is to be able to hold the capacity of at least one cell or one battery in the bank. And the tray I've got in here will adequately hold a heap of acid should I be so unfortunate that some spills. Now, in 30 years of putting batteries in, I've never ever seen a battery split or leak acid. The only time I've ever seen one leak acid was when a client inadvertently drilled a hole through the battery box and the drill bit contacted the side of the battery case. So the acid containment, you may not want to worry about it if it's out in a shed, or if you're in the dirt somewhere with a dirt floor, it's probably not so important. Here, I want some acid containment, and the other advantage of having acid containment is when I come to top these cells up with the distilled water, if I spill any, it'll get caught in here where it can happily evaporate away. The other thing we've got to talk about before I put these batteries into position is battery ventilation. When these batteries charge, they give off oxygen and hydrogen mixed, which can be quite explosive. And we don't want that. And it also smells a bit. It comes out with a little bit of acid mixed in it, a fine, tiny amount, and it gets a bit of a smell up. And I don't want this here in the shed. So I've ventilated the batteries through to the outside, and for this I've used 90mm water pipe. You can probably see through this to the outside. And on the outside of that piece of 90mm water pipe, I've fitted a little screen made specifically to keep insects out of rainwater tanks. It fits snugly in the pipe, and it's made the vents great for ventilation and also insect proof, so insects can't get into the battery bank. There'll be a cover on the front here, which I'll show at the end of the video. And the other thing I've done here is my battery comes out, and it comes onto, this is the power board where I'm going to mount all the stuff. The inverter's going to go up here, the solar regulator's going to go here, the circuit breakers necessary for the system can go here. And I've put this board, on hinges. So while I'm working on it, I can access the back of it and keep all the wiring really neat. Now I've pre-wired onto here a thing called a battery fuse. This is the holder of the battery fuse. And I've got a positive cable coming out of the bottom of the battery fuse and going across and coming in here. This is where the positive connection of my 48-volt battery bank will be. And I've got a negative lead coming out of my battery fuse and it's coming out here. This is where the negative connection of my battery bank will go. The battery bank will have to be connected from the top to the bottom, and I haven't installed it yet, but there's two holes drilled here and there'll be an interconnect lead that takes the current from one battery to the other and makes the series connection from a 24-volt bank of batteries on the bottom to a 24-volt bank of batteries on the top, and the series connection will make them a 48-volt bank, which will come down to here. I'm going to go ahead and lift these batteries into place now. They're quite heavy, but I can lift them. And there's a couple of things you want to know about flooded lead acid batteries. The first is, if they're leaking any acid and you get it on your clothes, it will damage your clothes quite badly, and you'll think you've got away with it until you go and wash the clothes and you'll discover that it's actually rotted a hole in them. The other thing is, because they've got battery, I'm going to wear battery acid in them. I'm going to wear a pair of safety glasses while I put them in. And if this acid inadvertently spills on your skin, you want to know where there's a water supply where you can go out and wash it off. On dry skin, it won't cause much harm for a period of time. I know that out the door over here, there's a tap, and I can go out there and I can wash the acid off quite quickly if it's unfortunate enough to get a spill on me. Safety glasses keep it out of my eyes. My eyes are wet. Acid in the eyes is very, very dangerous and can damage the eyes very, very fast because it reacts with the moisture in the eyes. So always wear safety goggles. And of course, I'll be a little bit careful lifting these into place. They're heavy. These golf cart batteries, though, by the way, they come with two lugs on the top. And if you hassle the people that provide it to you, you can either borrow or get given with the batteries a handle which clips onto them and facilitates lifting them into position. I'll go ahead and use that handle shortly, and I'll put these batteries into position. Right, that's got the batteries lifted into position, and I'm going to go ahead and connect them together now using the interconnects I made. And by the way, if you haven't got the tools and you can't be bothered making these interconnects up, they're readily available at big auto electrical stores or the battery supplier where you got the battery from. I just like to make stuff myself, and I've got the tools to do it, and so I've actually made all my interconnects. But if you can't be bothered doing that, that's fine, you can just go and buy them. The interconnects join the batteries together. Here we have positive, and that's a negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive, negative round up to the top battery bank to the positive terminal, negative to positive, etc. till we come out and arrive at the negative terminal on this side, which goes down to the battery fuse. I'll go ahead and put one of these on. And it's always a good idea to put the safety glasses on when you're working on the battery, so I'll do that, and I'll grab my insulated spanner which can't short across the terminals. The final thing when putting those leads on is to make sure they're positioned such that they don't hinder you taking off the caps when you come to put water in these batteries. So I've got this one tight here, and it's just positioned nicely away from the terminal on the battery I'm working on. And I can swing it round, it's well clear of the cap on the other battery. Tighten it off. And there's the first interconnect done. I'll go ahead and put the rest of the interconnects on now and connect it up and test it. Well, that's pretty much the completion of the installation of the battery bank. I've got the positive lead coming off the positive terminal of this battery going down to the bottom of the battery fuse here. I've got the series interconnects in place across the battery bank connecting the positive and the negative together. I've got the series interconnects going from the bottom battery bank through to the top battery bank. The series interconnects across the top battery bank, and the negative lead coming from the top battery bank coming down to my battery fuse. All that's left to do now is to test the battery bank and see if the voltage is correct and the polarity is correct, and then put the cover on. I'm going to use a multimeter. And test the battery fuse terminal voltage. Positive on positive, negative on negative. And I've got 51 volts DC, which is about right for a fully charged brand new battery bank. I'll go ahead and put the cover in place. I've made the cover out of clear perspex so I can see the battery bank as I walk past and check there's no corrosion on the terminals or anything like that. And it puts the battery bank on display, which is what I intended. I'll slide this into position. And I'm just going to hold this cover in place with a couple of screws. And there's my battery bank completed. It's got a clear cover on it, which will keep all the gases and stuff coming off the batteries contained in the compartment where they can vent out the back. It's childproof and it's quite safe, and it's also on display so that I can see if there's any corrosion forming on the terminals or anything like that as I walk past. And it's readily accessible so I can get to it to perform maintenance on it and put water in the batteries, etc. I'm quite happy with this installation. In the next video I'll go ahead and I'll detail the installation of the solar array.